Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Well, good morning. Welcome to Financial Issues. It's Tuesday, September.
Almost.
Getting way
Almost
ahead of myself. July the 16th, 2024. So we're glad that you tuned in today. Hopefully we'll get a lot of things right, even if we didn't get the date right off the bat. But Financial Issues.
We're just counting down the days to that rate cut, right? Supposedly.
I was getting way ahead of myself. Wasn't I? You've read my show notes, haven't you?
That's right.
All right. So Financial Issues is a ministry that educates people about financial issues from a biblical worldview, which is the view that we should have no matter what we're thinking about, no matter if we're thinking about the current events of the weekend, no matter if we're looking at politics, if we're looking at our pocketbook, if we're looking at our day timer, no matter what it is, all of the decisions in life are best viewed with a biblical worldview. So once we get that right, I guess it won't necessarily mean that things are easier, but it means that they'll be bearable, that we can find joy in our circumstances.
Amen.
So, lots of things have happened over the weekend.
Shana, speaking of the weekend, a good thing that happened is it was Pat's birthday this weekend.
Yes.
Happy birthday, Pat.
Well, let's start off on a good note.
There you go. That's right. Yeah, I know you all love Pat. We love Pat so much. She just does a great job, Shana. She's beloved by our partners. Yes. Just is the connection between us and the partners in many ways. So happy birthday to you, Pat. Hope it was great.
Yes. Happy birthday, Pat.
Yeah.
And we hope that you'll all wish her a happy birthday as well. Yeah. So, speaking of the not so great events that happened over the weekend, I'm sure you've all seen the clips hundreds of times by now. You know that there was an attempted assassination on former President Trump at one of his rallies this weekend. And, it's a very sad day that that's what we've come to in America. And, it's part of our history as well. President Trump is not the first assassination attempt that we've ever had, but, it just shows how polarized we are as a country right now. Yeah. And so, normally we do the stewardship verse in the very beginning, and we are definitely going to get to that too, but we wanted to kind of spend some time looking at, and I think, Seth, you talked about the spiritual implications and some of the things yesterday on the show, but, this is going to filter in through everything. Well, the markets on Monday were actually on the rise on the heel of the failed assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump over the weekend. And the markets really seemed to like the growing potential of a Trump presidency. By the closing bell yesterday, all three stock indices were in positive territory, not through the roof, but the Dow closed half a point higher, S&P a little over a quarter point higher, and the NASDAQ almost a half point higher. The Treasury closed at, the 10-year Treasury closed at 4.22, and oil at almost $82 a barrel. Well, Monday morning, we saw the futures indicating a higher opening. And of course, the markets did rise during the trading hours as well. The dollar rose against major currencies around the world, and Treasury yields ticked a little bit higher. That's because America first versus globalism is good for our economy. That's what we're getting. We have an administration of globalism right now, and President Trump is very much about America first, and I think that's the dominion that our country has been given. That's the authority and dominion that we're set over here, and we have to steward that, and we have to let the world take care of itself. We have to be good neighbors. We have to love our neighbors and do all of those things. But the economics likes it. A strong dollar is good for our economy. It also means that debt will need to be taken very, very seriously. Some of the other things that were mentioned is that markets are anticipating that a second Trump presidency will result in hawkish trade policy and looser regulations over issues from climate change to cryptocurrency. That's because government regulations equal increased cost to do business. Seth, did you know what the most expensive kind of tape is?
I don't, Shana. I don't know. What is it?
I think you do because you see my notes.
I can see it in the notes, but I'm trying to be suspenseful for our audience here.
Red tape.
Red tape.
That's the most expensive kind of tape.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So looser regulations are going to lead to more potential for companies to thrive because the capital markets will take care of itself.
Yeah.
When they do, they grow. When they grow, companies, when they grow, they hire more people, they buy more equipment, and guess what? They pay more taxes, which if used responsibly will help us get into a position where we can first stop borrowing money that we don't have and then potentially pay down some of our debt.
That'd be great.
Yeah, some of the other things. What were some of the other things there that we were reading about?
We saw here, Shana, shares of companies linked to Trump surged in pre-market trading. Of course, Trump Media and Technology Group was one of the big ones, jumped at times up over 60% yesterday. Another software firm, Fundware, gained almost 50%, and then Rumble rose about 17% as well. So it was a good day for some of those conservative-leaning stocks, especially DJT.
Yeah, and there's a lot of emotion when emotions tend to run high when things like this happen. In short term, the market is driven. So, I would just comment on that and say, DJT is still a speculative trade at this point and has dropped off a lot from where it came public. So it's still not back to where it was. But, that's a company that owns Truth Social. They exist because of what's been happening, the trend that the cancel culture that we've been living in. Donald Trump got deplatformed off of all social media during the last few years, and so he created his own social media. So those are, that's definitely gonna, and that's what a lot of financial people are saying is that if Donald Trump wins the presidency or, things like this happen, it's going to move the stock price of DJT.
Yep. Shana, we also saw crypto stocks jumping a little bit. Bitcoin rose about 8% to a 2-week high. Coinbase was up almost 6%. A couple other ones up pretty significantly too.
Yeah. That's because Trump said he would be a crypto president. He as much as he's been called Hitler and a fascist and, all of these horrible things, which I'm sure you've heard all the comments, all the speculation that's what's led to, this kind of incident that happened over the weekend. It's just inflamed people. When you compare somebody to Hitler on a regular basis, that ignites fear in the masses.
Yeah.
And it causes hatred to rise and, causes things like this to happen.
And, Shannon, it also doesn't help when the sitting president says we need to put Trump in a bullseye. Now, I know he didn't mean that literally, but still, that you use that kind of language. And by the way, Biden did kind of give an apology for that. He said he probably shouldn't have said that, but that's dangerous language. It's very dangerous.
It is. I mean, it's the same thing that happened to President Trump, at January 6th.
Yep.
He said things, to go peacefully and, all of these other things. And then it was turned around after the fact, after something that happened that he didn't order, was out of his control. Same thing that, Biden is now facing, those words have come back to bite him. Yeah. But, we don't want to do the same things. We don't want to repeat the same kind of injustices that have been, perpetuated against President Trump with, going back and looking at these kind of things. But, you have to be careful when you're in positions of leadership, what kind of, rhetoric you're using.
Yeah, big time. Shannon, kind of as like a final tie-in for all this stuff, what do you think all this tells us about the markets in regards to the upcoming election here?
Well, it tells me that, the odds of a Trump presidency are through the roof now.
Yep.
It's almost being priced in. And so what this tells me, the markets like it. Capitalism and freedom go hand in hand. Free markets work in free societies. Government is very, very inefficient. That red tape that I was talking about. Yeah. When the government gets their hands on a program, there is a cost of administration, right? I've heard cases where it's estimated to be around 40% to administer the cost of administering program. That means only 60 cents of every dollar actually goes to work for its intended purposes. You know, in a society like that, there are no consequences for failure in the government. Everyone gets a participation ribbon. Companies get bailed out when they make bad decisions. FDIC covers all kinds of deposits. People get bailed out of their student debt that they went into knowing what they were doing. And when they didn't, there's no consequences for when people don't accurately count the cost or make wrong decisions. Capitalism requires efficient use of capital. Well, that brings me to a whole nother point about DEI that we won't have time to get to in this segment. So we hope that you're going to, we hope that you'll stick around. We've got to take a break, but we're going to come back with more financial issues.
On the day I found I was pregnant, I was full of emotions and I just was so overwhelmed, and I don't know if I'm ready for this huge life-altering, changing commitment. I had individuals around me not wanting me to have this child. And somehow, and I was driving and I saw the Women's Help Center sign and I immediately turned in. That just took relief off of me, and I was like, you know what? It's gonna be okay. They gave me the confidence and the support that I needed to be able to go out and face the world. First time I held Finnegan, I just lit up with joy. I was so excited. This little boy that I had in my life, he is loving and generous. Watching him just grow and flourish into this incredible human being has just been so rewarding and so uplifting. Looking back, I don't know what I would do without him, because I needed him more than I think he needed me.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
Welcome back to Financial Issues, everybody. Great to be here with you today. Shana, our stewardship verse of the day, we touched on this a little bit in the first segment. This idea of counting the cost. Luke 14:28, a familiar one to us, says, "For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it?" I think we'll touch on it a little bit later in the show, Shana, but I wanted to get that in there for our larger audience here. Yeah.
So many places we can go.
Yeah, right. Seriously. Oh, I know. We can apply this to our country very easily right now.
Yeah, for sure. You know, in that scripture, it talks about, counting the cost, building a tower. We talked about, the red tape and the administrative cost and, the things that the government, the bailouts and those things, this doesn't seem in line with scriptural principles. And, even it goes on to talk there. Interestingly enough, what king would see, an enemy coming against them and not look at their resources and decide whether they could defeat them on their own or whether they need to form alliances? Yeah. Well, as we sit here and, deplete our military, force them to take shots, force people into resigning because they don't want to take vaccines, and, all the recruitment for the military has been the worst, I think, probably ever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could go down that rabbit trail, but we won't. This brings me to another failed agenda of the left, which is DEI. DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. They all sound like warm, fuzzy words and, high ideals. But, when you really interpret those concepts in line with biblical principles, you find a very, very wide gap. And I'll probably make the left progressive heads explode and may get kicked off a couple of social media platforms for saying this. So make sure you find us on Rumble and True Social. But, the tragedy that was averted this past weekend, clearly by the hand of God. It was the hand of God that saved President Trump, nothing else, in spite of the failures of men, could be very well due to the DEI policies of the left. What do I mean by that? Most people didn't even know who the head of the Secret Service was until after this came out, and there's been a lot said about it. But former President Donald Trump almost had to DIE as a potential result of DIE programs of the federal government. The head of the Secret Service was very likely a DEI hire. So there was an article that came out by, I believe it was CBS in 2023, and it was all about how the Secret Service's goal was to increase its representation of women by 30% by 2023. So, it was...
I didn't know that was their goal, Shana. I thought it was to protect the president.
Yeah, and promote their no-failure policy.
Yeah,
I would say that what happened on Saturday was a huge failure.
Gross. Failure.
Yeah. I guess the end result was that the former president's life was spared, but it certainly wasn't because of the efforts of the Secret Service, in my opinion. How in the world does a gunman get on top of a roof 425 feet away and take a shot with a rifle with the crowd yelling at the police that there's somebody crawling on the roof? That's a failure no matter how you look at it. And, the buck stops at the top of the organization. And, that's going to go to the top of the Secret Service. I'll be interested to see what happens, but, I guess to her credit, she was a President Biden appointee, and she did serve in on his Secret Service detail when he was VP of the United States. So I guess he had a lot of trust in her. But I just remember one of my first thoughts when I was watching what was happening there as they brought President Trump up to his feet. There was a woman that was in front of him. She was a good foot shorter than him. Yeah. His head was sticking out up above where she was. So, whether that would have been a man or a woman, it's still, in my opinion, kind of, doesn't really meet the physical requirements of the job. No. So, absolutely not. It's just, I'm not saying that there are not women who could do that job, but when you don't have freedom to hire the best person, whether that's male or female, black or white or whatever color you want to say, whatever sexual orientation you want to say, when you don't have the freedom to hire the best person for the job, whether it's physical strength, IQ, or, and you're forced to meet quotas and formulas that are based solely on the color of someone's skin or their gender, which that person had absolutely no choice in determining, rather than on the content of their character and God-given abilities, you will not get the best. That's my opinion.
Absolutely.
Love it or leave it, I guess.
Shana, this is another, we may get kicked off for this as well, but I'll just throw this out there too. It was very uncomfortable for me to see a small, short woman trying to protect a man like that. I think God designed it the other way around.
He
personally
did.
If a burglar breaks into my house, I'm not going to tell Megan, good luck, baby, go get him. I will pray. I'll pray in the corner. No, I'm going out there to, so there was so much about that was messed up. And I agree with you completely. It's the result of these DEI hires. Trump almost what'd you say, DIE?
Almost had to DIE
right.
because of DEI.
It's true. Yep.
Yeah, and it's really DEI that needs to DIE.
Absolutely.
Play on words there, but it's just it doesn't follow God's design. And to think that they want 30% of the Secret Service to be women, I'm pretty sure that's what it said. Why? Why do you have to have this cookie cutter outcome? Why do you have to try to fit a square peg in a round hole? You know what I mean? Why not just hire the best people for the job? And I started to, so I Googled, I looked up or AI'd it, whatever, how many women are in President Biden's Secret Service detail. And of course it said that they didn't know, or that wasn't public, or, whatever. But just, as I counted, and I didn't go back and get an accurate count, but going from memory, looking at what all happened there, who all was right there. There's more people that work on security detail than just the ones that are right there immediately surrounding the president. But the ones that were there, it was probably a 40-60 split. It wasn't, it wasn't 1 out of 3. But I don't know. There was a lot of things. I'm probably not saying anything new, but I just figured our listeners would want to know kind of where we stand on that. But because this issue pervades corporate America, and here's the tie-in with financial issues. This DEI philosophy has really infiltrated corporate America. You have a lot of companies that are going woke, and you hear the cute little slogan, "Go woke, go broke." Well, let me tell you what's behind that. And here's a good example. Tractor Supply recently, we were on the verge of putting a sell order on Tractor Supply because of some of the direction that they were taking with their DEI policies, promoting the LGBTQ agenda. A guy named Robbie Starbuck did a kind of an expose on some of the things from Tractor Supply, and we were in the process of processing those things and figuring out what we wanted to do. We would like to give companies, we would like to be able to press back on companies and say, look, you don't have to do this. Don't get engaged in the culture war. Stay out of it. Just make tractors. Not tractors, but just make, farm supplies and, serve your customers. Give the best customer service that you can. Get the best products to your customers at the best price you can. And don't be involved in that other stuff, because you're offending your base. Not only does it offend your base, which could impact your sales, as we saw with Target, as we saw with Bud Light, it can also really hinder your workforce. Now I'm watching, there's another question from that we've been getting from partners about another company. I don't have the call number on it, right? I don't know. Do you have the call number on it?
I believe it's, I want to say it's CD32, but David was just asking about this actually, and he thinks that he should sell. We've gotten a lot of questions about this company, Shana. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, don't put any new money into it for sure right now. It is something that probably shouldn't use the word crosshairs, but it's kind of in our crosshairs right now. It's definitely on our radar screen, and we're looking at what's going on with them because Robbie Starbuck's done another video and expose on them. So we're looking at, is there a way that we can get involved and do some pushback and do some due diligence before we just have to sell them. But, I can tell you that we have a zero tolerance policy on this kind of stuff. And if it's not something that we think can change, then, we will issue a sell on it as well. One thing that I would encourage you to do, though, on a positive note, is we have a letter of encouragement that we've drafted from Financial Issues to Tractor Supply, because they did an about face after all of this. They got a lot of pushback from their customers, from their shareholders, and they said, okay, never mind. We're going to kind of abandon this. We're just going to, hey, here's a novel idea. Let's just focus on doing good business, and
that's right.
And not doing any of that.
Then, sorry, Shana, I don't mean to interrupt you there. It was IN52 is this company that we're looking at. IN52 is teetering dangerously close, and we're...
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So don't put new money there, and be prepared. We may have to, a sell alert may be coming shortly. We're working on a few things in the background. So, thanks. We appreciate our partners that send us things. We use 2 screeners that do a lot of work, cover a lot of ground, but things are happening all the time, and we just, with all the work that we do on the analytics of companies and things like that, it's really hard to cover all of the every single thing that a company puts out. So we do appreciate that feedback from our partners. So sign that letter of encouragement for Tractor Supply. Go to financialissues.org and scroll down a little ways on the left, and you'll be able to sign that letter and tell them thank you for sticking to your fiduciary goal of returning value to shareholders and serving your customers.
Yep.
And
I'm putting that in the chat right now, Shana.
Oh, perfect. So, perfect. So, David, I would say stay tuned and just, keep an eye out. We'll get to it. Is definitely something that we're working on, and we're going to get some information out to you shortly. While you're at Financial Issues, find out about how you can catch the whole version of every show every day. Whether it's live or streaming, you can get that. But for those of you that listen on a short version of the show, we encourage you to get the long version, because we're going to continue with our scripture of the day about counting the cost in this next segment here. So we hope that you all can figure out how to watch it. For those of you listening live, stay tuned. We'll be back with more Financial Issues. Hi, this is Shana Bird, the host of Financial Issues. The Financial Issues family is so blessed to have saved tens of thousands of babies, all thanks to the generous support of you, our listeners and viewers. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds. Please go to preborn.org, that's preborn.org, or financialissues.org and click on the Preborn logo. Save a baby, save a life.
Every time I turn on the news, I get so frustrated. When I read a headline, it's obvious they're just trying to manipulate me for clicks and views. I just want to stay informed about what's going on without all the drama and opinions. I knew I needed to find an alternative, and thankfully I found FISM News. They keep the viewers up to date with all the latest news without the extra noise. Check them out by going to fismnews.tv. That's fismnews.tv.
Today, it's easy to get caught up in the rush and forget about what really matters. But when it comes to your money, are you making decisions that truly reflect your values? Too often, we invest in stocks without knowing what they stand for. What if your money could speak for what you believe in? Imagine following an investment strategy that recommends companies that don't support the things that break the heart of the Lord. A steadfast strategy, never wavering from biblical truth. When your investments align with your values, your money speaks for you. Let your money do the talking. Invest in what matters to you. Because biblical values matter, even when investing. Visit financialissues.org to learn more. That's financialissues.org.
Where's Mima? We found out Shepard's diagnosis when I was about 17 weeks pregnant. We learned that he was going to need a series of surgeries after he was born in order to give him what they considered a normal life. And we weren't sure how this worked.
Yeah, very emotional, very, very broken. And as my wife just said, not sure how this worked. And called Samaritan, and they said, you just go have that baby. You leave the rest to us.
And just to hear the confidence on the other end of the phone of, this is not something that you need to be concerned about at all. You focus on the health of your family, the health of your baby, and we will walk with you every step of the way.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it, and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back to Financial Issues, everybody. As we said earlier in the program here, our stewardship verse for today, Luke 14:28, applicable for today, of course. Which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it. Shana, we talked a lot about counting the cost there, both for good or for evil, in terms of DEI stuff especially. But, this is a passage we come to often on the show, and I think for parents and grandparents especially, one of the things we have to do when we're counting the cost in regards to our children is what to do about their education planning. And so that's kind of our segue to our teachable moment for today, which is really just a lesson in education planning. So, Shana, I'll just ask you to start. What are some of the most important questions we should consider surrounding this topic, education planning?
Well, I think when we're considering education and paying for funding education, we have to consider what we're willing and able to pay for. So, how are we preparing our children for college from a practical standpoint? Making good grades, developing good study habits is certainly instrumental, especially in the early years and all throughout college. But from a financial perspective, we need to teach kids about debt and about opportunity cost. College, I think college a lot of times gets really viewed through the lens of you have to have the college experience, you have to live the college life, and do all of those things. But that's really, in all reality, not what college is about. It's about preparing you to get a job, to teach you, how to operate in society, and be able to use your God-given talents and abilities to provide for yourself. So as parents and grandparents, we have to teach children how to count the cost. So very practically, when it comes to college, how much money are you going to need to fund your college education? Where you go, which college you choose, how long it takes you to get through college, all of that is going to be a determining factor in how much it actually costs. Will you be paying interest if you don't have the money to pay for that? How long will you be in debt? And more importantly, we need to be spiritually preparing them. They will be bombarded in most colleges with liberal, leftist, anti-Christ thinking. We have to teach them to be salt and light. We can't, we shouldn't totally avoid going into those situations. We should prepare our kids to be salt and light in those situations and bearers of the truth. So we have to make sure that they are spiritually prepared to walk into that battle when they head off to college.
Yeah, well said, Shana. That's really good. Let's talk about student loans for just a minute. This is a fun topic, especially considering the current administration's apparent proclivity to want to use tax dollars to pay them off. How should we look at this? Should we allow our kids to take advantage of it while it lasts? I mean, it's there. Or should we just not partake in something because it's so controversial? What are your thoughts on that, Shana?
Well, I think, it's best to avoid student debt altogether if possible. We know it's not always possible, but if you are going to have to engage in debt, either on behalf of your kids or allowing your kids, which I think would be the better choice. As a financial advisor, I have clients who are trying desperately to get into their retirement years, and they're saddled with a student loan that they co-signed for one of their kids that didn't even finish college. So they're having to,
Yikes.
to pay for that.
Yeah.
So it's best to avoid that debt altogether if possible. Most people, I don't know if they're aware, but even your Social Security benefits could be garnished if you have unpaid federal loans. There are limitations in place. Of course, the government can only withhold up to 15% of your Social Security if you default on your student loans. However, and they've got to leave you with at least $750 in monthly benefits. If it's not a government loan, if it's maybe you went to a private institution, well, they can even take legal action against you because you are making a promise to repay certain amounts of money, and if you don't, then they can take legal action against you. Should we take advantage of help that's offered? Well, if there is legitimate help that's available, I guess you should take advantage of it. The purpose of college is to prepare you to get a job one day and to be producing an income. And when you get a job, you will be paying taxes. And I have a feeling that when you're the one paying the taxes, you're going to have a much different opinion about whether the government should be paying off everybody's student debt loan.
Absolutely. Yep. And Shana, that kind of begs the question, how beneficial do you think is actually getting a higher education degree today, considering how much it costs, what you mentioned earlier as well about it being a battleground spiritually in most colleges? I find also the stories I hear is most colleges now, they aren't really teaching things that are of use now. They're teaching agendas, and especially the left-leaning ones, of course. But there's so many other options out there for young people, learning a trade, for example. How would you advise folks who are considering higher education for their children or grandchildren? Maybe they don't even need it.
Yeah, I would say count the cost.
Yeah.
Make sure that you actually need the degree that you're considering paying for. As you mentioned, trade school, plumbers, electricians, realtors make really, really good livings, and they don't require traditional college degrees. My kid, I've still got a few years to decide what I'm going to do for my kids, but I'm going to have a really hard time sending dollars to a school that's trying to indoctrinate my children and convince them to turn away from the teaching that they've been brought up in.
Yeah, it's really good. Now, Shana, just switching gears a little bit here to a 529 plan. We've heard about that as kind of one of the main education planning tools. What is a 529 plan, and is it BRI?
Yeah. So there's two kinds of 529 plans. There's the prepaid ones that are typically run by the states for state institutions, and then there are private 529 plans that you can fund. It's an account that you can set up. And it has certain benefits. If the money that you put in grows tax-free as long as it's taken out for college down the road. That can certainly be a benefit. However, I'm not a fan of 529 plans because none of them are biblically responsible. So all 529 plans are sponsored and run by mutual fund companies, and unfortunately, Timothy Plan's not one of the custodians or the administrators of 529 plans. So all of the 529 plans that you could get into only offer mutual funds that are not screened, and the majority of which are not biblically responsible.
And in the time we have left before the Ag, Shana, what are some other avenues for education planning outside of the 529? What could people potentially look for?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say briefly, and maybe we can expand on this, the details of it a little bit.
Yep.
But there's another college savings account called an education savings account, or a Coverdell, or an ESA. You may have heard of those. It has some of the similar traits as a 529 plan, but there are some differences. Maybe we can come back to that after we hear from Craig Haugaard with the Ag Report. What do you think?
Yep, awesome. Yeah. I think that sounds good there, Shana. A little bit of time left before the Ag here. I know we have had a lot of happy birthdays to Pat, so thank you all for that as well. Some folks talking about J.D. Vance also, Shana, in the chat. I'd be interested to see how that plays out with the Trump-Vance ticket. We'll have to see.
We'll have to see.
Yep.
Well, we're going to hear from Craig Haugaard with the Ag Report. After that, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back with more financial issues.
This is Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for July 16th. Well, corn was driven lower yesterday by fund selling. In fact, the fund sold 22,000 contracts, which drove the December futures to the lowest close in the life of the contract and set a new record for the largest speculative short position. Now, the weather is hot in the near term, but that heat is fairly brief, and temperatures are moderating through the 15-day forecast. That emboldened traders wanting to short the corn market. At the close, December corn was 10.5 cents lower at $4.04 1/4. The prospect of good weather led soybean traders to contemplate increased production, and that led to an emboldened managed money crowd selling 14,000 contracts of soybeans during yesterday's trade. Now, the U.S. crop is rated at 68% good to excellent. That's ahead of the 5-year average pace, with 51% of the crop blooming and 18% setting pods. At the close, November beans were 25 1/4 cents lower at $10.40 per bushel. The direction of wheat was set when ICOR increased the projected size of the Russian wheat crop by 1.2 million metric tons. Here in the U.S., Plus, we saw the condition of the hard red spring wheat crop increase by 2% to 77% good to excellent. At the closing bell, Minneapolis September wheat was 16 3/4 cents lower at 5.80 3/4. Kansas City dropped by 12 1/4 cents, closed at 5.55 1/2, and Chicago was 18 1/4 cents lower at 5.32 1/2. Cotton futures showed a little strength during the session, and at the closing bell, December futures were 117 points better at 72.44. Livestock futures were mixed. We had October live cattle 27 1/2 cents lower at $183.80 per hundredweight. September feeder cattle were 80 cents higher, so they settled at $258.90 per hundred. And October lean hog futures dropped by 37 1/2 cents, ending the day at $69.77 1/2 per hundredweight. Class 3 milk futures had an extremely quiet session. In fact, at the close, the August futures were unchanged at $19.69. This has been Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
Fear and uncertainty can cause us to hold things tightly and rely on ourselves. But during uncertain times, as believers in Christ, we are called to surrender fully to our sovereign God. The call to surrender to Jesus is one step in our growth in holiness. And it doesn't just mean you give over a few things. It means He gets it all, including our finances, our investments. Learn a biblically responsible investment strategy proven over 25 years. Keep the money God has entrusted to you out of companies that participate in things that God detests. Fully surrender. Become a Financial Issues Partner today. Learn more by going to financialissues.org/join. That's financialissues.org/join.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. Thanks for sticking with us. Man, the show is flying by today.
Sure is.
Well, we were talking about education, savings, funding, college education, and things like that. And we were talking about the 529 plan, which, you know, the biggest drawback to is that there are no biblically responsible options for that. So, you know, I guess you could make the argument that I could do a 529 plan and just use the, you know, the treasuries or the, you know, the only biblically responsible options that are in those plans. But that really kind of defeats the whole purpose, because the whole purpose of doing a 529 plan is to get that tax-free growth if you do go to college. And those options are not going to provide you much growth. You'd most likely be better off just doing a regular old investment account, paying taxes on your dividends and capital gains along the way, and probably have more money built up than you would really get the benefit from the 529. Now, if they had a 529 plan that was self-directed, that would be awesome. That would change my opinion totally. So, you know, you do have other options, which is a Coverdell savings account, education savings account. There are some limitations on that. There are some income limitations. If you make over a certain amount of money, you're not allowed to contribute, but I would say that a grandparent could fund an education savings account if the parents have too much income. Other differences between the Coverdell and the 529 is that the assets in a Coverdell must be either used for higher education, distributed, or transferred to another beneficiary by the time the original beneficiary is 30 years old. There is no age requirement with a 529 plan. So those are kind of some of the differences.
Yeah, good stuff, Shana. Last two questions here just on your philosophy. First one, what do you think is the best way to save for a child's education plan?
I mean, I think the education savings account is a good option.
Yeah.
But then I just think a regular old investment account is probably the best option. You don't have to worry about the biblically responsible aspect because you can invest in whatever you choose to invest in. And yes, you're going to have to pay some potential some taxes on dividends and capital gains along the way, but you're not going to really have any other rules to follow. You're not going to have distribution requirements. The other thing about both the Coverdell and the education savings account and the 529 plan is that if you don't use the money for higher education, then you kind of lose that benefit. You know, you have a penalty on the penalty and taxes on the earnings portion that you end up distributing to get your money out if the money is not used for higher education.
Yep. And then the last question, I'd love to hear your philosophy on parents and grandparents paying for their children's higher education, or is it better for the kids to learn a little something and earn their education and do it that way? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a decision that I think you have to make on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
You know, when I went to college, I got scholarships, and then my parents paid for my entire education beyond that. Now, I worked while I was in college. I taught group exercise, worked in a gym, worked at a law firm. I got my real estate license. I was already a very productive member of society and, paid for a lot of my other things. And I was very grateful that my parents were able and willing to do that for me and that I finished school with no debt. I know others that did not finish. I know cases where parents' money was really wasted. The kids didn't make good grades. They dropped out. They didn't get their degree. Their parents maybe have still debt left over from it, or really gave up an opportunity cost to fund their own retirement, and they're still taking care of those kids today, those adult kids today. So, I think it's a good idea to have the kids have some skin in the game, whether you can afford to pay for all of it or not. Consider a match, kind of like a employer plan does when they say, we'll put some money away for you if you put some money away too. But not necessarily that you force your 10-year-old to fund their own college fund, but once they get to school, maybe match their efforts. If you can pay for, X amount of dollars, will pay for double that amount, or whatever it might be. Read the scriptures for yourself. Pray for wisdom. Start by counting the cost. Get a projection of how much it's going to cost. Sit down with them. Do the math. Go through it. It's easy to find some calculators online about how much debt that they're going to start their career with. How much money will it cost them out of their very first paycheck? You need to show them how much the government's going to take out for taxes, but you also need to show them, beyond that, the next thing that you're going to have to pay is your student loan. And then, depending on what kind of job that you're going to get, what does the income look like for that? Are you going to still have money to do the other things you want to do, to buy a house, to get transportation, to start and raise a family? So, you want to count that cost for sure. As we see from the scriptures, ridicule and shame came upon those who didn't count the cost in the case of the one building the tower. And even worse, in one example, the conquering of a kingdom could result in death and social and economic submission for the king who didn't adequately prepare for the battle that was coming against him. They weren't all saved by Uncle Joe's handouts.
Yep.
I think we've been saved by the bell. We've got a call.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go to John. John's calling from Alabama.
Hey, John. Good morning.
Good morning. I was just wanted to ask a question. How much does, say, Target pay for the LGBTQ XYZ, their donations to them a year?
Yeah, I don't have that information right off the top of my head, but,
John, just with
it's a lot.
some quick research, it's in the millions for sure. I just did a quick research on it. Last year, they gave at least a $2 million donation to one group. So you can imagine that's one donation, probably many more,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just from one company a year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's the left
you.
and it's the donations from these companies. Thanks for that question, John. That brings up a good point.
That's good.
It's the donations from these companies that is funding this evil agenda. That's why, one of our slogans here is defunding darkness. We screen out the companies who are using shareholder dollars to promote these ungodly agendas. That's why you don't want to be yoked with these companies. You want to adopt a biblically responsible strategy. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to be finding you Christian companies. For the most part, they don't really exist on a large scale, and that's okay. Companies, in investing, companies exist to return value to shareholders. So in a free market society, companies don't make it if they're not profitable long term, if they have bad business plans and bad management and things like that. And, we would submit to you, just as we have throughout the show, that it's a lot of these leftist DEI policies that are really ruining corporate America. I did watch some of the story that was done on, was it IN 52?
Yeah. Yep.
IN 52.
Yep. IN 52.
And I guess I can just say it because it's, people can find out. It's John Deere. Along the same lines as Tractor Supply, in that kind of business, serving a certain demographic. Their customers are of a certain demographic, and you have this CEO, and that's where it's coming from. The leadership and the powers that they're bowing to. You watch all of these, people with the green hats on, the rednecks of the world, the farmers and the rangers and the people that work for these companies, sitting in a meeting watching a presentation over the genderbread man.
Yeah.
How to.
That's so.
I almost
like a
can't
Babylon
say it
Bee
with a
article.
straight face, but I mean, it's like, have you ever talked to people who have had to sit through that diversity training? They hate it. Yeah. It's a morale killer. It's, there's whole companies like Red Balloon that exist now to help people get jobs where they're not going to have to sit through that kind of garbage. That a company's going to hire them based on their gifts, their abilities, their willingness to work, to be devoted to the company, to show up on time, to put their best foot forward, to operate in excellence. That's why people should get hired or fired, not because of the color of their skin or their choices in sexuality, which shouldn't even really be discussed in the workplace. It has no place there. I mean, it doesn't.
Yep, absolutely. And certainly not in public schools to children either.
Oh, absolutely. That's the worst kind.
Yeah.
That's the worst kind. Pushing the LGBTQ agenda to children is despicable. It not only tries to teach them something that's contrary to the Word of God, that God made them, male or female, who they are, but it introduces them in an undue season to matters of sexuality. Mm. What business does a 3-year-old have with sexuality? Yeah. It blows my mind.
Absolutely.
Blows my mind where we are.
That's why we're here, Shana, right?
That's why we're here.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
Thank you to all of you who support Financial Issues. We're much more than just helping you with your investing. We're helping you push back against the darkness that's being funded by corporate America. Well, folks, we hope that you are encouraged today and that you will come back tomorrow for more financial issues. Find out more about our ministries at financialissues.org. And Lord willing, we'll be here tomorrow and the rest of the week, helping you remember that everything belongs to God. The Master's coming back. There's going to be a test. And we want to help you be able to give a good answer for the stewardship and the assets you were chosen to manage. Come back tomorrow for more financial issues.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.